The morning was perfect. Too perfect, maybe, like the world was holding its breath, waiting for something to break. I stood on the ridge, my boots sinking into the damp earth, the air thick with pine, and the faint metallic tang of a coming storm. Below me, the valley stretched out, a patchwork of green fields and a winding creek that glittered like a vein of silver under the dawn. This was my land, 40 acres of hard-won freedom, paid for with 20 years of grinding construction jobs, skipped meals, and dreams deferred. I'd named it Haven Ridge, a place for me and my daughter, Ellie, to start over. Just us, the trees, and the quiet I'd been chasing my whole damn life. Ellie, 12 years old and stubborn as a mule, was already down by the creek, her fishing net dangling over the water, her ponytail bouncing as she hunted for crawdads. She wore her brother's old denim jacket, too big for her, sleeves rolled up to her elbows. "Dad, look," she called, holding up a wriggling crawdad, its claws snapping at the air. Her grin was brighter than the sunrise. I waved back, my chest tight with something I hadn't felt in yearship. We'd moved here 3 weeks ago, trading a cramped apartment in the city for this slice of nowhere in the Blue Ridge Mountains. No neighbors for miles, no Wi-Fi, no noise except the wind and the creek. I'd spent my life building other people's homes, mansions, condos, strip malls, while Ellie and I lived off instant noodles and secondhand furniture. Every extra dollar went into this land, this dream. I was 42, bone-tired, but standing there, watching Ellie laugh as she chased another crawdad. I thought I'd finally made it. This was our sanctuary. Then the drone came. It started as a low hum, like a mosquito you can't quite place. I squinted up, shielding my eyes against the sun. A black quadcopter hovered above the creek, its red lights blinking like angry eyes. It dipped low, buzzing over Ellie's head, close enough to ruffle her hair. She yelped, dropped her net, and stumbled back into the shallow water. "Dad," she shouted, her voice sharp with fear. I was already moving, my boots pounding the dirt as I ran down the slope. "Hey," I roared, waving my arms. The drone jerked upward, hovering just out of reach, then zipped away toward the tree line. By the time I reached Ellie, it was gone, swallowed by the pines. She was soaked, her eyes wide, clutching the net like a weapon. "What was that?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," I said, pulling her close. Her wet jacket soaked my shirt, but I didn't care. "You okay?" She nodded, but her grip on my arm said otherwise. I scanned the ridge, the trees, the empty sky. Nothing. No sound, no movement. Just the creek gurgling like nothing had happened. But something had. That drone wasn't a kid's toy. It was sleek, expensive, the kind with a high-def camera and a purpose. Someone was watching us. I should have known then that Haven Ridge wasn't just ours. Someone else had their eyes on it, and they weren't here to fish. The next morning, I was up before dawn, checking the perimeter of the property like a soldier on patrol. I'd bought this land at auction, outbidding a dozen faceless investors who wanted to turn it into another gated community, or strip mine it for gravel. The deed was ironclad, signed and notarized, locked in my safe. But that drone had me rattled. I'd moved here to escape the city's chaos, sirens, bills, the constant grind. I didn't expect to find a new kind of trouble waiting. Ellie was still asleep in the cabin, her net propped against the wall, her boots caked with creek mud. I made coffee, black and bitter, and sat on the porch, my rifle across my lap. Not loaded in it yet, but close enough to make a point. The air was crisp, the kind of morning that makes you feel alive. But I couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on my back. That's when I saw the truck. It came up the dirt road, a white F-150 with a logo on the door, Blue Ridge Preservation Society. It parked at the edge of my property, just beyond the no trespassing sign I'd hammered into the ground last week. A man stepped out, tall and weary, wearing a khaki vest and a baseball cap pulled low. He carried a clipboard, the universal badge of someone who thinks they're in charge. Behind him, a woman climbed out of the passenger side. She was older, maybe 60, with gray hair in a tight braid and a face like she'd been sucking lemons for breakfast. She wore a navy blazer, pressed and pristine, like she was headed to a board meeting instead of a dirt road in the middle of nowhere. "Morning," the man called, waving like we were old friends. His smile was too wide, too practiced. "Name's Randall Holt. This is Margaret Voss, president of the Preservation Society. Mind if we have a word? I stood, rifle still in my hands, not pointing, but not hidden either. You're on my land, I said. Speak from there. Randall's smile didn't falter, but Margaret's eyes narrowed, sizing me up like I was a problem to be solved. Mr. Callahan, is it? She said, her voice clipped, like she was reading from a script. We represent the interests of the Blue Ridge community. This land falls under our oversight for environmental protection. We're here to discuss your activities. Activities, I said, stepping off the porch. You mean my daughter catching crawdads in my creek? On my property? Margaret didn't blink. The creek is part of a protected watershed. Your presence here fishing, disturbing the soil violates our bylaws. We need to inspect your permits. I laughed, short and sharp. Permits? Lady, I own this land. 40 acres, free and clear. I've got the deed, the survey, the tax records. You want to see permits? Go bother someone who's renting. Randall raised his hands, playing peacemaker. Now, no need to get heated. We're just doing our job. The society's been managing this valley for decades. That creek feeds into the county's water supply. You start mucking it up, it affects everyone downstream. Managing, I said. You don't manage my land. I bought it from the county, not your club. And that drone you sent yesterday, buzzing my kid, that's harassment. Margaret's face didn't change, but Randall's smile slipped, just for a second. Drone, he said, tilting his head. We don't use drones, Mr. Callahan. Must have been a hiker or a kid playing around. I didn't buy it. Not the fake innocence, not the clipboard, not the way Margaret's eyes kept darting to the creek like it was hiding something. You've got 5 minutes to get off my property, I said, resting the rifle against my shoulder. Next time, I won't ask. Margaret stepped forward, undeterred. Mr. Callahan, you're new here, so I'll be clear. The Preservation Society has authority over this valley. If you don't comply, we'll file a lien against your property. You'll lose everything. I took a step closer, close enough to see the veins in her neck. You threaten me again, and you'll find out how fast I can make you disappear. This is my land, my home, my daughter's future. You don't get to touch it. Randall grabbed her arm, pulling her back. We'll be in touch, he said, his voice tight. They climbed into the truck, the engine roaring as they peeled out, kicking up dust that hung in the air like a warning. Ellie appeared at the door, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Who were they, Dad? Trouble, I said, watching the truck vanish down the road. But nothing we can't handle. That night, I couldn't sleep. The cabin was quiet. Just the creak of the floorboards and Ellie's soft breathing from the next room. I sat at the kitchen table, the deed spread out in front of me, every line and stamp double-checked. It was legit. I'd paid $320,000, every cent I had, plus a loan I'd be paying off until I was 60. The county had confirmed it. Haven Ridge was mine. So why did it feel like a target? I pulled out my laptop, an old clunker that barely connected to the spotty cell signal I used as a hotspot. I searched Blue Ridge Preservation Society. The website was polished, full of buzzwords like sustainability and community stewardship, but the details were vague. Board members listed, Margaret Voss at the top, with a photo of her smiling like a politician. No mention of Randall Holt. No public financials. Just a donation button and a list of protected areas that included half the county. My creek was on there, marked as critical habitat. Bullshit. The county hadn't mentioned any restrictions when I bought the land. I dug deeper, scouring forums and local news archives. A few articles mentioned the society pushing back against developers, but others hinted at something shadier: land disputes, lawsuits, property owners pressured to sell after environmental violations. One post on a hunting forum caught my eye. A user named RidgeRunner88 claimed the society had forced his uncle to sell his land after they found endangered salamanders on his property. No proof, no appeal, just a quick sale to a shell company tied to the society. The post ended with a warning: watch your back. They don't play fair. I closed the laptop, my coffee cold. The society wasn't just a bunch of tree huggers. They were players, and my land was in their crosshairs. The next morning, Ellie wanted to go back to the creek. I hesitated, the drone still fresh in my mind, but her eyes were so damn hopeful. "I'll be right there with you," I said, grabbing my rifle and a folding chair. We set up by the water, the air thick with summer heat. Ellie waded in, her net swooping through the shallows, while I kept one eye on her and one on the ridge. The trees were still, but I felt it against that watch feeling, like a predator sizing up its prey. It happened fast. Ellie screamed, dropping her net and splashing backward. I was on my feet in a second, rifle up, scanning the water. "What is it?" I shouted. "Something grabbed me," she cried, pointing at the creek. I waded in, the cold water soaking my jeans, and saw it a metal trap, rusted but sharp, clamped shut in the mud. It wasn't a fishing net or a kid's toy. It was a poacher's trap, the kind used for small game, hidden just below the surface. Ellie's ankle was red but not bleeding. She'd been lucky. "Who put that there?" she whispered, clinging to my arm. I didn't answer. I pried the trap open, its teeth glinting like a warning. It wasn't old, not abandoned. Someone had set it recently, and I had a good guess who. I carried Ellie back to the cabin, her net forgotten in the creek. Inside, I locked the door, checked the windows, and sat her down with a glass of water. "Stay here," I said. "Don't open the door for anyone but me." "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice small. "To end this." I drove to the county office, the trap wrapped in a tarp in my truck bed. The clerk, a tired woman named Linda, looked up from her desk. "Ben Callahan," I said, dropping the trap on the counter. "Someone's setting illegal traps on my property. I want to know who's behind the Blue Ridge Preservation Society." Linda sighed, pushing her glasses up her nose. "The society's been a pain in everyone's ass for years. They've got friends in High Place County Board, state regulators. Margaret Voss practically owns the zoning committee. Then why's my creek on their website as protected when I own it?" She frowned, tapping at her computer. "That's weird. Your deed's clear. No easements, no restrictions. They've got no legal claim. Tell that to the trap that almost took my kid's foot off." Her eyes widened. "You think they? I don't think. I know. And I'm not waiting for them to try again." She printed out a list of society board members and their registered addresses. Margaret Voss lived 10 miles away, in a gated estate that screamed old money. Randall Holt wasn't listed, but a name caught my eye: Victor Crane, consultant. No address, no phone, just an email tied to a domain that matched the society's website. I thanked Linda, tucked the list in my pocket, and headed back to the truck. On the drive home, I called my old friend Nate, a private investigator I'd worked with on a construction fraud case years ago. "Nate, it's Ben. I need you to dig into something. Blue Ridge Preservation Society, Margaret Voss, and a guy named Victor Crane. Anything you can fin, financials, lawsuits, dirt." "Sounds like you're in deep," Nate said, his voice crackling through the spotty signal. "Give me 48 hours. When I got back to the cabin, Ellie was at the table, sketching crawdads in her notebook. She looked up, her eyes searching mine. "Did you fix it?" "Not yet," I said, ruffling her hair. "But I will." That night, I set up a trail camera near the creek, hidden in the brush. If that drone came back, or if Margaret and her goons stepped foot on my land, I'd have proof. I wasn't playing defense anymore. This was my home, my daughter's future, and I'd be damned if I let anyone take it. The next morning, the camera was gone. I found it 50 yards from the creek, smashed to pieces, its memory card missing. Nearby, in the dirt, was a single boot print, not mine, not Ellie's. It was deep, deliberate, like someone wanted me to find it. Tucked under a rock was a note, handwritten in block letters: "Keep out. This isn't yours." I gripped the paper so hard it tore. This wasn't about crawdads or creeks. This was about power, control, and something bigger than I'd realized. Margaret Voss wasn't just a busybody with a clipboard. She was a predator, and I'd just stepped into her territory. I went back to the cabin, locked the door, and loaded the rifle. Ellie was at the window, watching the ridge. "Dad," she said, her voice steady now, "someone's up there." I followed her gaze. A figure stood at the edge of the trees, too far to make out details. Just a shadow in a dark jacket. He didn't move, didn't wave, just watched. Then, like smoke, he was gone. I grabbed my phone and called Nate. "You got anything yet?" "Working on it," he said. "But Ben, be careful. Voss has ties to some heavy hitters, real estate developers, state officials. And this Crane guy? He's a ghost. No record, no address, just a name on some old contracts. I'll keep digging. I hung up, my eyes locked on the ridge. The quiet was gone, replaced by something heavier, darker. Haven Ridge was mine, but it was under siege, and I wasn't about to let Margaret Voss or her shadow man win. The next day, I took Ellie to stay with my sister in town. I didn't want her here if things got ugly. She protested, but I promised I'd bring her back once it was safe. You're my priority, I told her, kissing her forehead. Always. Back at the cabin, I rigged more camera S3 this time, hidden better, with backups in the cloud. I also set up motion sensors along the property line. If anyone came from my land, I'd know. That afternoon, Nate called. Got something, he said. Voss's society isn't just about trees. They've been buying up land along the valley for years, all through shell companies. Your property's the last piece in a puzzly proposed pipeline route. Big money, Ben. Millions. And Crane? I asked. Still a ghost, but I found a link. He signed off on environmental reports for the society, all claiming endangered species to block development text when it suited their buyers. Your creek's listed as a habitat for some rare fish. Funny thing, no one's ever found those fish. They're boxing me in, I said, my voice low. Exactly. Watch your back. I'm sending you the files. The files arrived an hour later. Contracts, emails, bank transfers. The society had funneled millions through fake environmental studies, all signed by Victor Crane. My land was the final holdout, the key to a pipeline deal that would make Voss and her cronies rich. And they weren't going to stop at drones or traps. That night, I sat on the porch, rifle ready, the stars bright above the ridge. The motion sensors were quiet, but I wasn't. I was done waiting. I grabbed a flashlight, my phone, and the rifle, and headed to the creek. If they wanted a fight, I'd bring it to them. At the water's edge, I found another trap, this one bigger, baited with a dead fish. Nearby, a fresh tire track cut through the mud, not a truck, but something smaller, like an ATV. I followed it, the trail leading up the ridge, into the trees. The air grew colder, the pines closing in like walls. Then I saw a clearing, hidden from the road. A campsite, abandoned but recent, a fire pit, a tarp, and a stack of papers half burned in the ashes. I knelt, sifting through the remains. Maps, surveys, my property marked in red. A name scrawled in the margin, Crane. And a single sentence, take the ridge, no matter the cost. I stood, my blood cold. This wasn't just about money. This was personal. Margaret Voss and Victor Crane weren't just after my land, they were after me. And I was ready to show them what happens when you corner a man with nothing left to lose. The clearing felt like a trap the moment I stepped into it. The air was too still, the pines too quiet, like the forest itself was holding its breath. The half-burned papers in my hand crinkled as I gripped them tighter. The words, take the ridge, no matter the cost, seared into my brain. My flashlight cut through the darkness, catching glints of metal in the underbrush, an empty can, a broken knife, a coil of wire that looked like it belonged to something mechanical. This wasn't a hiker's camp. This was a staging ground. I crouched low, my rifle slung across my back, and scanned the tree line. The ridge loomed above, its silhouette jagged against the moonlight. Somewhere up there, Victor Cranier, whoever was pulling his strings, was watching. I could feel it. That same prickle on my neck I'd felt in the city when a deal went sour or a job site turned dangerous. I'd learned to trust that instinct. It had kept me alive. My phone buzzed in my pocket, the signal weak but holding. It was Nate, my pie friend, texting a single line. Crane's tied to a shell company called Ridgepoint LLC. Your land's on their acquisition list. Call me. I pocketed the phone, my jaw tight. The Blue Ridge Preservation Society, Margaret Voss, Victor Crenethy weren't just harassing me. They were hunting me, and Haven Ridge was the prize. I gathered the papers, stuffing them into my jacket, and headed back to the cabin. The trail was steep, the dirt loose under my boots, and every snap of a twig made my hand twitch toward the rifle. I wasn't scared, not yet, but I was angry. Angry at Margaret for threatening my home. Angry at Crane for hiding in the shadows. angry at myself for thinking 40 acres and a deed could buy peace. By the time I reached the cabin, the sky was turning gray, dawn creeping in like an uninvited guest. Inside, I locked the door and spread the papers on the kitchen table. Maps, mostly with my property circled in red, handwritten notes marked elevation points, water flow rates, and something called Phase 2. One page stood out, a contract between Ridgepoint LLC and a company called Titan Energy, dated 6 months ago. It outlined a preliminary agreement for a natural gas pipeline, with my land listed as critical access. The payout? $12 million. My stomach twisted. This wasn't about crawdads or endangered fish. This was about money, big, dirty money, and I was the only thing standing in their way. I called Nate. "Talk to me," I said when he picked up. "Ridgepoint's a front," he said, his voice low, like he was worried someone was listening. "Registered in Delaware, no physical address, just a P.O. box. Crane's name is on the incorporation papers, but he's listed as a consultant, not an owner. The real money's coming from Titan Energy. They've been buying up land along the valley for years, using the society as a cover. Voss signs the environmental reports, Crane pushes the sales, and Titan bankrolls it. And my land? It's the choke point. The pipeline can't go through without your creek. They've been trying to scare you off drones, traps, fake violations. If you don't sell, they'll lose the contract. Then why not just make an offer?" I asked, pacing the kitchen. "They did," Nate said. "Last year, before the auction. The county records show an anonymous bidder Ridgepoint offered $100,000. You outbid them." I stopped pacing. "They've been after me since before I even owned it." "Looks like it. And Ben, these guys don't play nice. Titan's got a history of accidents on properties that don't sell. Fires, vandalism, worse. Watch your back." I hung up, my eyes on the papers. Ellie was safe with my sister, but I wasn't. Not here, not now. I grabbed my laptop and uploaded the trail camera backups to the cloud, just in case. Then I called the county sheriff's office and left a message for Deputy Harris, a guy I'd met at the auction who seemed like he wasn't on anyone's payroll. "Harris, it's Ben Callahan. I've got evidence of trespassing and illegal traps on my property. Call me back." By noon, I was back at the creek, setting new traps of my own, not for animals, but for proof. I hid 2 more cameras, one in a tree, one buried in a pile of rocks. I also rigged a tripwire with a bell near the property line, low-tech but effective. If Voss or Crane came back, I'd know. That afternoon, the F-150 returned. This time, Margaret Voss was alone, her blazer swapped for a windbreaker, her braid tucked under a cap. She parked just outside my gate, clipboard in hand, and walked straight toward the creek like she owned it. I was waiting, rifle in one hand, phone in the other, already recording. "Still trespassing, Margaret?" I called, stepping out from behind a tree. She didn't flinch, just stopped and fixed me with that same lemon-sucking stare. "Mr. Callahan, I'm here to offer you a chance to avoid trouble. The society's prepared to buy your land to $150,000, cash. You can walk away, no questions asked." I laughed, loud enough to echo off the ridge. "You think I'd sell my home because you wave a check? You put a trap in my creek, scared my kid, smashed my camera. You're not buying me out. You're going to jail." Her eyes narrowed, but her voice stayed calm, like she was reading a grocery list. "You're making a mistake. This land isn't worth your life or your daughter's." My finger twitched on the rifle. "You threaten Ellie again, and you'll find out how far I'll go." She smiled, thin and sharp. "Bold words, Mr. Callahan, but you're out of your depth. You don't know who you're dealing with." "I know enough," I said, stepping closer. "Ridgepoint LLC, Titan Energy, Victor Crane. You're not protecting the environment. You're stealing land for a pipeline." Her face didn't change, but her hand tightened on the clipboard, knuckles white. "You've been digging," she said. "That's dangerous. Not as dangerous as crossing me." I raised the phone, making sure she saw it recording. "Smile, Margaret. You're live. 50,000 people are watching you threaten a man on his own property." Her eyes flicked to the phone, then back to me. For the first time, she looked rattled. "You're a fool," she hissed. "You think a video changes anything? We own this valley. Not my ridge, I said. Get out. Now. She turned, slow and deliberate, and walked back to her truck. As she drove off, I checked the video clear audio. Her face in frame, every word caught. I uploaded it to the cloud and sent a copy to Nate. Add this to the file, I texted. She's not done. That night, the tripwire bell rang. It was to 17 a.m., the sound sharp enough to cut through my sleep. I grabbed the rifle and checked the cameras on my phone. The feed from the creek showed movement of figures, hooded, moving fast. One carried a shovel, the other a bag. They were digging near the water, too far for details but close enough to trip the sensor. I didn't call the sheriff. Not yet. I needed proof, not promises. I slipped out the back door, keeping low, the rifle steady in my hands. The night was cold, the moon half hidden by clouds. I followed the creek, staying in the shadows, until I reached the clearing. The figures were gone, but the ground was torn up, fresh dirt piled beside a hole. In the center was a metal box, locked, about the size of a showbox. I didn't touch it. I'd seen enough crime shows to know better. Instead, I snapped photos, marked the spot with a stick, and backed away. Whatever it wasn't a trap for crawdads. It was evidence or a threat. Back at the cabin, I called Deputy Harris again. This time, he picked up. "Ben, it's late," he said, voice groggy. "Someone's digging on my land," I said. "Found a box buried by the creek. I've got it on camera. You need to see this." He sighed. "I'll be there at dawn. Don't touch anything." Harris showed up at 6 a.m., his cruiser kicking up dust on the road. He was stocky, mid-40s, with a mustache that looked like it belonged in a Western. He listened as I walked him to the creek, showed him the photos, the torn-up dirt, the box. He crouched, gloved hands probing the soil. "Could be nothing," he said. "Kids, maybe. Kids don't bury locked boxes at 2 a.m., I said. "This is Voss. Or Crane." He glanced up, eyes sharp. "You've got a beef with the society?" "They've got a beef with me. They want my land for a pipeline. I've got proof contracts, maps, a video of Voss threatening me." He stood, brushing dirt off his knees. "Send me what you've got. I'll run it up the chain. But Ben, word of advice. The society's got pull. County board, state reps, even the feds. You're poking a bear. Let it roar," I said. "This is my home." He nodded, almost like he respected it. "I'll take the box to the lab. Stay sharp." The next day, Nate sent more files. Bank records showed Ridgepoint LLC funneling money to Margaret Voss through a fake consulting firm, Voss Environmental Solutions, over $2 million in the last year, all tied to Titan Energy. Another file listed properties the society had acquired. After owners reported harassment, broken fences, poisoned wells, anonymous threats. My name was on a new list, marked non-compliant. I was printing the files when Ellie called from my sister's place. "Dad, can I come home yet?" "Soon, kiddo," I said, forcing a smile into my voice. "Just tying up some loose ends." "Is it that lady? The mean one?" "She's part of it. But don't worry. I've got this." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "I miss the creek." "Me too," I said. "We'll be back there soon, catching crawdads together." After we hung up, I sat in the dark, the rifle across my lap. The cabin felt empty without Ellie, but it wasn't Safinat yet. The box, the drone, the notes, they were pieces of a puzzle, and I was close to solving it. But every step felt like walking into a minefield. 2 days later, Harris called. The box had explosives, he said, his voice tight. "Low grade, homemade, but enough to do damage. We're treating it as attempted sabotage. Your cameras helped caught 2 guys, faces covered. But we're running the footage through facial recognition." "Voss?" I asked. "No proof yet, but we're watching her. Stay put, Ben. This is bigger than you thought." Bigger didn't cover it. That night, I found another note, taped to my mailbox. "You can't hide forever." No signature, just that same block lettering. I checked the cameras, nothing. Whoever left it knew how to avoid them. I called Nate. "I need you here," I said. "Bring your gear. We're ending this." Nate arrived the next morning, his SUV packed with surveillance equipment and a handgun he didn't bother hiding. He was ex-military, weary and graying, with eyes that missed nothing. We set up a command post in the cabin, monitors, motion sensors, a drone of our own. If they're watching you, we're watching back, he said, calibrating the drone's camera. We spent the day combing the property, finding more signs of intrusion: cut fences, tire tracks, a hidden trail camera that wasn't mine. Nate hacked its feed, tracing it to an IP address linked to Ridgepoint LLC. They're not even trying to hide, he said. They think they're untouchable. Then let's touch them, I said. That night, we flew the drone over the ridge, its camera sweeping the forest. At 1:14 a.m., it caught something: a truck, parked in a clearing 2 miles from my property. 3 men, one with a limp, unloading crates. Nate zoomed in. That's Crane, he said, pointing at the limping man. I'd bet my life on it. We sent the footage to Harris, who called back within the hour. We're moving on this, he said. Stay put. I mean it. But I couldn't. Not when Crane was out there, plotting his next move. I grabbed the rifle, Nate grabbed his gear, and we headed for the clearing. The ridge was dark, the air heavy with the threat of rain. We moved silently, years of construction sites and late-night stakeouts making us ghosts in the woods. The truck was still there, but the men were gone. The crates were open, filled with more explosive wires, timers, enough to level my cabin. A note was pinned to one crate: last chance, Callahan. I looked at Nate. They're not scaring me off. He grinned, sharp and dangerous. Then let's scare them. We rigged the clearing with our own cameras, hid the explosives in a ditch, and waited. At 3 a.m., Crane returned, alone, his limp more pronounced in the dark. He froze when he saw the empty crates, his head whipping around like a trapped animal. That's when Nate's drone buzzed overhead, its spotlight pinning him like a bug. Victor Crane, I shouted, stepping out of the trees, rifle raised. You're done. He spun, his hand going for a pistol at his hip. Nate was faster, his own gun drawn. Don't, Nate said. You're on camera. Again. Crane's eyes darted between us, calculating. Then he laughed, low and bitter. You think this ends with me? Voss is a pawn. Titan's the real player. You're fighting a war you can't win. Maybe, I said, stepping closer. But I'm winning tonight. I didn't shoot. I didn't need to. Harris's cruiser rolled up minutes later, lights flashing. Crane was cuffed, his pistol confiscated, his smug grin gone. You're making a mistake, he said as they loaded him into the car. This ridge isn't yours. It never was. It is now, I said. The next morning, I brought Ellie home. She ran to the creek, her net in hand, her grin back where it belonged. I watched her, the rifle still close, but the weight on my chest was lighter. Voss was under investigation, Crane was in custody, and the evidence, cameras, notes, explosives was piling up. Haven Ridge was ours again, at least for now. But as I sat by the creek, Ellie splashing in the shallows, I saw something on the ridge glint, like sunlight on glass. A lens, maybe, or a scope. Someone was still watching. I didn't tell Ellie. I didn't call Harris. I just baited my hook and cast my line, the water rippling under the morning sun. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The glint on the ridge stayed with me, a splinter in my mind. It was there when I tucked Ellie into bed that night, her crawdad sketches scattered across the table. It was there when I checked the cameras at midnight, the feeds clear, but the shadows too deep. It was there when I sat on the porch at dawn, rifle across my lap, coffee gone cold. Haven Ridge was mine, 40 acres of dirt, water, and dreams, but it felt like a battlefield. Victor Crane was in custody. Margaret Voss was under investigation. But that glint told me the war wasn't over. Not yet. Ellie woke early, her boots on before I could finish making pancakes. Can we go to the creek? She asked, her eyes bright but cautious, like she sensed the tension I was trying to hide. Soon, I said, ruffling her hair. Let's eat first. She nodded, but her gaze drifted to the window, to the ridge beyond. She wasn't a baby anymore. At 12, she saw more than I wanted her to. Is it safe now, Dad? She asked, her voice quiet. I forced a smile. Getting there, kiddo. Just a little longer. But I wasn't sure. Not after Crane's words. Voss is a pawn. Titan's the real player. Not after the explosives, the notes, the smashed cameras. Titan Energy wasn't just a company, they were a machine. And my land was the last cog they needed. I'd stopped Crane, exposed Voss, but the glint on the ridge said someone else was still out there, waiting. Nate called at 8 a.m., his voice sharp with urgency. "Ben, we've got a problem. Titan's moving fast. They filed an emergency injunction with the county, claiming your land violates environmental codes. They're pushing for eminent domain." "Eminent domain," I said, my grip tightening on the phone. "They can't just take my land. They can if a judge signs off. They're claiming your creek's a public resource, critical for the pipeline." Voss signed the report dated yesterday. "She's still pulling strings, even under investigation." I paced the kitchen, my boots loud on the wood floor. "She's in deep with Titan." "What about Crane?" "Still in lockup, but he's not talking. Harris says they found more explosives in his truck, plus maps of your property. He's facing federal charges, but Titan's lawyers are circling. They're trying to bury this." "Then we unbury it," I said. "What's the play?" "I've got a contact at the state attorney's office. Send me everything, cameras, notes, the files from the clearing. I'll push for a fraud investigation. But Ben, you need to be ready. Titan doesn't lose quietly." I hung up, my eyes on the ridge. The glint was gone, but the feeling wasn't. I sent Nate the files, every scrap of evidence, the drone footage, the buried box, Voss's threats on video, the burned papers from the clearing. Then I called Deputy Harris. "Titan's trying to steal my land," I said. "You need to see this injunction." Harris sighed, his voice heavy. "I saw it. It's bad, Ben. They've got a judge in their pocket, Carson, old money, big Titan donor. But your evidence is solid. I'm passing it to the feds. Stay put and don't do anything stupid." "Too late for that," I said, half joking. But I meant it. That afternoon, I drove Ellie back to my sister's. She didn't want to go, her arms crossed, her neck clutched like a shield. "I'm not scared, Dad," she said, her jaw set. "I want to stay." "I know," I said, kneeling to meet her eyes. "But this is my fight right now. You're my backup, okay? Keep the creek safe for us." She nodded, reluctant, and hugged me tight. "Don't let them win," she whispered. "Never," I said. Back at the cabin, I prepped for war. I checked the cameras, reloaded the rifle, and set up a new tripwire system, this one, with alarms linked to my phone. Nate arrived at dusk, his SUV packed with gear, night vision goggles, a second drone, and a laptop rigged for real-time surveillance. "We're not just defending," he said, setting up a monitor. "We're taking the fight to them." We flew the drone over the ridge, sweeping the valley. At 9:47 p.m., it caught movement, a black SUV, no plates, parked near an old logging road. Two men armed, unloading crates like the ones we'd found before. "Titan's hired muscle," Nate said, zooming in. "Mercenaries, probably. Not local." "Then let's introduce ourselves," I said. We moved fast, cutting through the woods on foot, silent as ghosts. The ridge was steep, the air thick with pine and damp earth. We reached the SUV just as the men loaded the last crate. I recognized one of them not by name, but by his limp. Not Crane. Someone new, but the same vibe. Professional, dangerous, hired. "Hey," I shouted, rifle up. "Drop it." They froze, hands hovering near their holsters. Nate flanked them, his gun steady. "Don't," he said. "We've got you on camera, and the feds are watching." The man with the limp laughed, his voice low and gravelly. "You're Callahan, right? The guy who thinks he can stop Titan?" "I'm the guy who's going to," I said. "Who are you?" "Doesn't matter," he said, his eyes cold. "You're out of time." He moved for his gun, but Nate was faster, tackling him to the ground. I disarmed the second guy, zip-tying his hands with ties from Nate's kit. The crates were packed with more explosive enough to level half the ridge. A note was taped to one, "Leave, or the creek burns." "You're done," I said, shoving the note in the limping man's face. "Tell Titan they lost." He spat, blood mixing with dirt. "Titan doesn't lose. You'll see." We dragged them to the cabin, called Harris, and waited. The feds arrived at midnight. Agents, one with a badge that said FBI, the other from the ATF. They took the men, the crates, and the note. "This ties to Titan," the FBI agent, a woman named Carter, said. "We've been building a case for years. Your evidence might be the break we need." "Then move fast," I said. "They're coming for my land." She nodded. "We're raiding Titan's regional office tomorrow." Stay low until then. But Titan didn't wait. At 3 a.m., my alarms went a feverish sensor on the property screaming. I grabbed the rifle, Nate grabbed his drone, and we ran to the creek. The air smelled wrong, sharp and chemical, like gasoline and sulfur. The water was dark, slick with oil, a rainbow sheen spreading across the surface. Someone had dumped chemicals, poisoning the creek Ellie loved. I heard footsteps, heavy and deliberate, coming from the ridge. A figure stepped into the moonlight. Margaret Voss, her windbreaker stained, her braid unraveling. She held a canister, empty, dripping with whatever she'd poured into the water. Behind her, two more men armed, their faces hard. "You couldn't leave it alone," she said, her voice calm but venomous. "This could have been easy, Ben. You could have taken the money. You poisoned my creek," I said, rifle steady. "You threatened my daughter. You're done." She laughed, sharp and brittle. "Done? I'm just getting started. Titan's bigger than you, bigger than the feds. This land is theirs, and you're just a squatter." Nate's drone buzzed overhead, its camera rolling. "Smile, Margaret," I said. "You'll live again. The world's watching you destroy a man's home." Her eyes flicked to the drone, then back to me. For the first time, she looked scared. "You think a video stops us? You're nothing. Then why are you shaking?" I said, stepping closer. One of her men raised his gun, but Nate fired first, a warning shot into the dirt. "Next one's in your chest," he said. Voss froze, her men hesitating. That's when the feds rolled in, 3 SUVs, lights blazing, agents pouring out with guns drawn. "Margaret Voss, you're under arrest," Agent Carter shouted. "Drop the canister. Now." Voss didn't move, her eyes locked on me, like she could burn me down with a stare. Then she dropped the canister, her hands raised, but her smile was back then dangerous. "This isn't over," she said as they cuffed her. "Titan always wins." "Not today," I said. They loaded her into a car, her men in another. Carter stayed behind, her face grim. "The creek's contaminated," she said. "We'll test it, but it's bad. Titan's been dumping chemicals on holdout properties for years, makes them uninhabitable. Forces sales. Then clean it," I said. "This is my home." She nodded. "We'll try. And Ben, you did good. This evidence-sayer cameras, the notes, the explosive assets, enough to take Titan down. Not just Voss, the whole operation." The next week was a blur. The feds raided Titan's offices, seizing records that linked them to a dozen illegal land grabs. Voss was indicted on 20 counts: fraud, conspiracy, environmental violations, attempted murder. Crane flipped, giving up names to save himself. The pipeline deal collapsed, the valley safe for now. The creek was still a mess, but the feds brought in a cleanup crew, promising to restore it. I brought Ellie home. She ran to the creek, her net in hand, but stopped short when she saw the water dull, lifeless. "The crawdad's gone." Her face fell, and I felt it like a punch to the gut. "It's ruined," she whispered. "Not forever," I said, kneeling beside her. "We'll fix it. Together." She looked at me, her eyes fierce. "Like you fixed them?" I nodded. "Exactly." 3 months later, the creek was clearer, the cleanup crew making progress. Ellie was back to her sketches, her laugh echoing through the cabin. I'd installed new cameras, better locks, a gate that said Haven Ridge, private property, in bold letters. The ridge was quiet, no glints, no shadows. But I didn't relax. Not fully. Nate sent a final report. Titan's CEO was under investigation, their assets frozen. The society was dissolved, its board members facing charges. But one name stuck with me: Victor Crane. He'd vanished after his plea deal, no trace, no record. I kept his note from the clearing, tucked in my safe. Take the ridge, no matter the cost. One morning, as Ellie and I fished in the creek, crawdad's back, water almost clean, he saw something on the ridge. Not a glint, not a shadow, but a man. He stood still, watching, then turned and disappeared into the trees. I didn't chase him. I didn't need to. Haven Ridge was ours, and anyone who came for it would learn what Voss and Crane did. You don't mess with a man's home. Not when he's got a daughter to protect and a line he won't cross. Ellie tugged my sleeve. "You okay, Dad?" I smiled, casting my line. Better than ever. It wasn't just about the creek, or the land, or the fight. It was about what we stand for when the world pushes back. Voss and Titan thought they could bully me, scare me, break me. They didn't know I'd been broken before years of scraping by loss, by fear, and I'd rebuilt myself stronger. Haven Ridge wasn't just dirt and water. It was Ellie's laugh, her net in the creek, her sketches on the table. It was the quiet I'd fought for, the peace I'd earned. If you've ever faced a Voss, a Titan, someone who tried to take what's yours, your home, your family, your dignity, then you know. You don't have to fight with fists or guns. Sometimes it's a camera, a phone call, a stand you take when everyone else backs down. Comment below with an 8 if you've stood your ground, if you've fought for what's yours. Share your story, because the world's full of Titans, but it's also full of people like us, people who don't break, don't bend, don't run. This is Haven Ridge. This is our story, and no one's taking it from us.